Hey, Sophia, Alice, Hope. I'm not even sure what I'm going to talk about today. Um, First, I'm going to talk about your name. So, when your mom was pregnant and your mom and dad were picking out a name, they decided on Sophia first, and then it was Sophia Hope. And I thought Sophia was a beautiful name, and it is. Um, Hope Hope has a very special meaning to me because I've been hopeless. And at that point, life was not worth living. So I feel like it's an essential part of being a human to have hope. So I really was happy with that. And then your mom and dad decided they wanted Alice, which is also beautiful. But I was so disappointed Hope wasn't going to be your middle name. So they decided on Sophia Alice Dash Hope Price. And I was very thrilled with that decision. I think it's a beautiful name for a very beautiful little girl. So I have a new picture in my bedroom over here. It's you. Your mom took that picture. And your dad and I were in New York not too long ago for him to do a podcast with a man named Ian Beck. The podcast is called Locked In. I thought it was a real opportunity for your dad. And the day before the podcast, your dad and I went shopping, mainly for your mom, because her birthday was while we were gone. And we wanted to do something special when we got back. So we were looking all over at purses. Your mom wanted a Michael Kors purse, and we found one. We found several, but she had a certain idea of what she wanted. But we found one that was outside of what she had said she wanted, but it was really, really nice. It was blue, and so we sent a picture of it to her, and she liked it as well, so we got that one. And while we were at the store where we found the purse, I saw these little gift sets where it was a mom size purse, and then there was a little bitty purse for a little girl, and I couldn't resist. I had to buy it. And this picture over here is of you with your little person, and you got a little hat on, a little floppy hat, and you are just so adorable. And I say, oh my God, she's such a big little girl. So you're starting to say words now. Um, the first word you said at my home, we got up one morning for breakfast. It was one of the times you spent the night with me. And we go downstairs, and you go in the cupboard and you pick out an orange bowl. And it's the bowl I always whip eggs in if we have eggs. And you grabbed that orange bowl and you held it up to me and you said, Eggies, Eggies. And I about fell over. You knew the bowl and you knew what to say. You're amazingly, amazingly smart, Sophie. You recently said kitty cat when you came over. Your mom said you said juice. You can say wee and woo. And by your birthday, your second birthday, my guess is you're just going to be talking away because you know just about everything we're saying to you. I love you so much. So I think I'm gonna go into a little bit, and these videos are not chronological. I have told you a little bit about my life growing up, but now I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with going to prison. Um, so I had been catching cases, uh, legal cases, for a while, um, because of my drug addiction, and they were theft. Um, that was my main quote unquote hustle. Um, but I got possession of paraphernalia, driving on a suspended license. The list is quite long. And we live and have lived in Wayne County. And I had gone over to Oakland County to steal some things. And Oakland County is one of the wealthier counties in the state of Michigan, and they don't like people from Wayne County, one of the poorer communities in Michigan, because Detroit resides there, um, or here, and they don't like people from Wayne County coming to Oakland County committing crimes. And when I got caught over there, um, it wasn't good. Um, I spent 6 months in the Oakland County Jail waiting to go to trial. I was trying to beat it, even though they caught me and I did it. I was still trying to fight it, and I had an attorney. My bond was $1,000. Your grandfather, Dylan's dad, Dylan was not born at that time, your dad, came up um, to visit me. And at that time, he had a Social Security um, case going. He wanted to get on Social Security disability, and it was not determined whether he could be or not, although he had seen doctors and that. So he came up to visit me one time, and he said, "I have some good news and some bad news." I said, "Okay, what's the good news?" He said, "The good news is I got Social Security disability, and they gave me back pay, about $30,000. The bad news is I spent it all." Kiwi, I flipped out. It was only $1,000 to get me out, and I knew they wanted to send me to prison. So my plan was if I got out, I was leaving the country. I was going to Canada. And he knew it. And when I flipped out, I went across the table to try to hurt him. and the guards pulled me off before I was able to hurt him. I was devastated. However, your grandpa, your dad's dad, was a drug addict as well, and I'm sure he spent it all on drugs. Maybe got ripped off. Um, I don't know. He didn't explain it. I didn't ask. So I went to court on the day. Well, I went to court a lot of times. And it came down to they took me over to court and they were ready to pick the quote unquote jury. And my attorney strongly suggested that I plead guilty and allow the chips to fall where they may. Because he said if I took it to trial and I lost, they would be even harsher on me for using the money of the county to go to trial, etc. So I pled guilty. And I went to court on the day of sentencing, and I was chained, handcuffed chains, um, to about 10 other people, and we all had to sit in the sentencing box, and they wheeled a man with handcuffs on in a wheelchair, and rumor moved pretty quickly that he had broken into somebody's house, he had raped somebody, and then the police showed up and he jumped out a window, and that's what got him paralyzed. So several people were sentenced, and when the judge called my name, I got up and I spoke about being a drug addict, about really being a decent, law abiding person. It was the drugs that influenced my decisions and me being in that situation. And he said he was ready to sentence me, but based on what I said to him, he was going to send me back down to the quote unquote bullpen, the waiting area to go to court, and call me back up. So we did that. We had lunch in the bullpen. He called me back up and he said 1.5 to 7.5 years in prison. He said he was going to give me 2.5 to 7.5, but he knocked a year off. It still seemed like eternity. I mean, all that kept flashing in my head was the 7.5 years. So I went back to the unit that I was staying in. Um, I was in a depression after that. I slept a lot, and it wasn't too long, a week or two, and they were ready to take me to the Michigan Department of Corrections, Huron Valley, which was the women's prison. So I had to be put in ankle chains and a belly chain. Um, The belly chain was a chain around my belly, and then two handcuffs that, were right in the middle. So I wasn't going nowhere. So we took the van ride along with, I don't know, 15 other women. And when you get to prison, Sophia, they take everything from you. The only thing you're allowed to take in is one picture of your family, one Bible, and that's it. So that signified to me that all you had were your memories and your faith going in. They make you send everything else home, or they toss it if you don't have a home to send it to. It was a very sobering experience. I mean, I was scared, fear of the unknown. But I've always had courage to walk through my fears, whether it be in that kind of a situation, whether it be using drugs, and that's a false sense of courage, though. And in recovery, I think just life takes courage if you're really gonna live it. You know, there has never been an absence of fear, not in my world, but there has been the courage to walk through my fears. And this was one of those times. So, in the beginning of the sentence, they put you in what is called quarantine. There were maybe 20 other people in quarantine. You have to, you put in this room with bunk beds with other prisoners. You're dressed in white. You're going through a battery of tests because they don't want you to take any kind of diseases out into population where the other prisoners are. So while you're going through these batteries of tests and they're waiting for the results, you have to be in quarantine. And there were some really there were murders in there. There were mass murders in there with me. And that scared me. And the vast majority of the people there were repeat people there. I mean, these people were seeing guards that they knew, and they were running up and hugging them like it was a school reunion or something. And that freaked me out. I thought, never will that be me. Never. Um, there was a fight in quarantine where a woman took a metal. It was either an ashtray or it was a bowl or it was something round, and picked it up and hit another prisoner in the head with it. I was just taking it all in. I kept thinking I have to find out the rules of this game because I want to win this game. I want to get out with as little drama and chaos as possible. But if I did not know how this all worked, it wasn't going to happen. So the day that we all get out of quarantine, we all pass the tests. And the first place they take us is to um, what is called a pod, where there are, this is to have in the cafeteria in this pod, which is a big building where certain prisoners live. And these were high risk prisoners. Um, so I'd go into the cafeteria. We went in there to eat a meal before they placed us wherever we were going. And it was another shocker. Um, there were a lot of women that were acting like men. There were women who had beards, partial beards. They've had facial hair. It was just a very confusing kind of gig. It really was. But after that, they were overcrowded at the time. So, other than the murderers who stayed in that pod, people like myself that were not high risk were put into the gymnasium. The gymnasium was set up with, I'm going to say, 50 or more bunk beds. And you were given a bunk. It was loud, very, very loud. It was always loud. Even even after lights out, it was loud. That was a very unpleasant kind of thing. So I'm not going to go into details about everything at the prison. A lot of disturbing stuff. But I ended up being transferred to Coldwater, a prison called Coldwater. It's in the city of Coldwater, Michigan. From there, I went to Camp Gilman in Clarkston, Michigan, because I had what they called habitual time, which means you had to do the front end of your sentence, and my front end was 1.5 years. My tail was 7.5 years. So I had to do the 1.5 years. So within that 1.5 years, I was transferred around. Um, and I got out after the 1.5 years. I was 26. It was 1986 when I went to prison. Year and a half after what, 27, 28 years old. I got out and I went to a halfway house in downtown Detroit. It was the YMC building on Witherell Street. It is now the site of Comerica Park where the Tigers play their games. They tore down the YMCA after I got out of it. Um, I stayed clean for a while in there and I worked down in Greektown, but then I relapsed. I relapsed with your grandpa. He was steady using drugs while I was going through this whole prison thing. Um, so being around him was a trigger for me. And I ended up using and tried to hide it. But they did have me drop urines randomly. And I knew when those urines came back positive for heroin, I was going back. So I kind of timed how long it would take for them to come back. I kind of knew when they'd come back. And I took a garbage bag, put almost all my clothes in it, and I was on the 8th floor of this building. The whole 8th floor was prisoners, women. And I threw the bag of clothes out the window into the alley. Then I signed out to go to work. I went downstairs to get the bag of clothes and take them to Cobo Hall where they had lockers. And some homeless guy with a cart had gotten the bag of clothes and was wheeling it off down the alley. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that's mine. And he ultimately gave it to me, but I mean, it was just that quick. And I got a cab, me and my black bag of clothes, went to Cobo Hall, put it in a locker, went to work, and then called before I went back. And that was kind of cool with the guard that answered the phone on the 8th floor of the YMCA. And I asked her, has the urine come back? Am I scheduled to be sent back? And she said, just come back, Joe. I'm like, are they planning on sending me back? That's what I want to know. And she kept saying, Jill, just come back. So I did. And the urine came back positive for opiates. And they did not send me back. They sent me to either the 9th or the 7th floor, a place called Project Transition. It was a drug treatment center. And I mean, as drug treatment centers go, and I've been in a lot of them, Kiwi, it was a pretty good program. Um, at that time, now I had been suffering from bulimia since I was young because I was so fat. I would binge eat an entire box of cereal, 12 Dunkin' Donuts. I would binge eat and then purge. And I had been doing that for a long time. And there were times when I didn't do it. But it was all bulimia and anorexia, these eating disorders, are all about control. When my life seemed out of control on the outside, this is when I would have the bulimia eating disorder. It was like, okay, I can't control anything out here, so I bet I can control what goes into my body and what comes out of my body. So I was doing that while I was in project transition. And I completed that program and I stayed clean. Mainly, I think, because I wasn't allowed to see your dad. Or you're not your dad, your grandpa. Your dad's dad. After that, I was sent back to the eighth floor, and they gave me another visitation with your grandpa. So at the time, I wore contacts. And with contacts, the blinking of your eye is what keeps them in place over your color, the colored part of your eye and your cornea. Um, and while I was on this visit, I remember I had to keep pushing the contact back into place, but I didn't realize my eye was not blinking. And my then husband didn't realize my eye was not blinking. He was probably high as hell. Um, so I get back to the eighth floor, and I go to my room, and I'm by myself in this room, and I look in the mirror, and my mouth is drooped, my eye is not blinking, and I'm immediately doing like this, thinking I was having a stroke. So I go to the front desk and I'm like, oh my God, I'm having a stroke. You need to call EMS. So they did. And I get to the hospital and they run some blood tests. And they tell me you are not having a stroke. You have what is called Bell's palsy. So that's when half your face kind of goes numb. Your eye doesn't blink, your mouth droops. It looks like a stroke, but it is not. It's a virus. And after researching this, I find out that it's the same virus that causes mononucleosis. And I had mononucleosis when I was 16 or 17. So my bulimia triggered that virus that still lives in my body today. And there is a link after researching the hell out of multiple sclerosis, which is what they tell me I have. Not 100% convinced of that, but there is a link between mononucleosis, Bell's palsy, and MS. So I know that I made a patch for my eye. My lips still drooped. And I admit, I thought if I'm gonna have to live like this, I'm gonna be getting high.